This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Spencer Morris, who is a seasoned healthcare and business leader who has navigated high growth environments, culture shifts, and organizational transformation. What sets him apart is the way that he marries operational excellence with culture-driven leadership, helping leaders not only get results, but do so in a way that energizes teams and sustains performance. His perspective resonates especially with professionals in healthcare and mission-driven businesses, where people and purposes are inseparable from the outcomes. So, Spencer, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Well, thank you so much, Steve. I'm excited.
Give us a little context. Where you grew up, where you're from, kind of how you got into this line of work, and just give us a little background.
Absolutely. So originally, I'm from Utah, and had a friend of mine who reached out to me while I was finishing up my last little bit of school at Utah State, and he was an administrator at a skilled nursing facility in Southern California, and had need of a marketing director. And so I was graduating in business marketing and came out and got to know the skilled nursing world. And that was my first introduction into long-term care, which I ended up being in for about 17 years.
Okay.
And in that, I started out as a marketing director, became very interested in becoming a licensed administrator, and I operated for a number of years, became a regional director of operations, and oversaw multiple facilities. And I absolutely love long-term care. And in during that time, I recognized that there were certain facilities that just excelled. They did so much better than the other facilities in their market. They outperformed even when times were exceptionally challenging. And there were also those other facilities that they could have been those beautiful facilities that they seemed like they had everything going for them, but they struggled. And when challenges came their way, progress seemed to halt. And so I recognized that those companies, those facilities that really dug into the leadership and being intentional about building their culture, they excelled. They succeeded in tough times and tough environments, whereas those that didn't, whatever came their way ended up kind of taking the legs out from under them,
Yeah.
and they had high turnover, and it was that challenging situation. And so that's kind of where I got my passion for developing leadership and being intentional about culture.
Okay. And so, are you still in long-term care now, or are you doing something? What are you doing now?
So about a year and a half ago, I started my own consulting group company where that's exactly what I do is I go in and I help mid to small companies or organizations to put very specific and strategic emphasis on identifying and developing leaders, and then also being very strategic and intentional about developing culture so that they are able to create that kind of environment that people love to be there, and it creates engagement, it creates creativity and innovation. And so that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half.
Yeah, that's great. And what's the name of your company?
The name of the company is Pathway Consulting.
Okay, great. Okay, and so you come into these facilities and uh, people hire you. What are they looking for? Do they realize they have an issue? Do they realize that they're just not firing on all cylinders? Why does somebody reach out and talk to you?
That's a great question. I think there's a number of different reasons that someone might reach out. One will be they recognize that they have a problem. And it may be that they can't quite put their finger on why they have a problem, but they recognize that there's a lack of engagement, challenges within their team or their organization. And so they will reach out to me for that so that we can come in, that I can come in and help them evaluate where they are at as a leader, also where their team is at and where they might have opportunity, where there might be some challenges or pitfalls, and to create some very strategic plans to help them move past that. And then there's also the other organizations where things are really going well, but they're just not satisfied. And they want to go from, good to great. They want to take it to the next level. And so they want that outside perspective to evaluate where they're at in those in their own leadership and in their own culture. And so I get kind of anywhere in that spectrum. They're already doing great and they just want to take it to the next level. And then those other companies that are they're really struggling and they can't quite put their finger on as to why, and they need an outside perspective.
Great. Okay, so you're in with these organizations and they're looking for something different. So what generally do you find, like you said, the better cultures, the better leaders do well. What is it generally that you come in and see that is visible to you or that you notice that you can make changes with right away?
Yeah, usually if there are challenges that are going on with that organization, it's because they're focusing almost entirely just on the operation side. They're looking at what is their strategy and how do they go and execute their tactics or their initiatives, and they're spending little to no time on their culture and their environment and how they're making sure that they're evaluating their own development as well as the development of the people that are around them. And so those organizations, in contrast, those organizations that are doing extremely well, they are dedicating time to this. Most of them are doing it at least on a weekly basis where they're, as a team, they're either reviewing a book together that has to do with their core values. They're also reviewing podcasts that resonate because of what it is that they're trying to accomplish, their mission or their values, and they're just making it very intentional. They're also those you'll see those leaders that are making sure that they're doing one-on-ones or some type of individual engagement with those that they're responsible for, and they're being very specific and strategic about, okay, what are the goals of this person, both in their work responsibilities, but also how do they want to develop? Who do they want to end up being? And so that those leaders are being very intentional about helping those people to make efforts to develop in those areas. And so that's kind of where I see that big impact. Those companies that are doing it really well versus those that aren't. There's little to no engagement or any type of talk about what is the environment and how are we trying to be intentional about creating what we want.
Yeah, you being in healthcare myself, or that's, where I spent most of my career in healthcare. It's always surprising to me when there is so much emphasis on the numbers and the spreadsheets and the productivity and
Right.
whatever. I mean, you'd think you'd go into healthcare because you really want to help people, and when it becomes a numbers game, then it's a whole different focus. So when you go into these companies, do you help them develop leadership development programs, or do you coach one-on-one with leaders? What does it look like from your perspective in working with these companies?
That's a great question, and it kind of varies depending on the company. A lot of these organizations, I will make sure that we're doing one-on-one with whoever that CEO or administrator or leader is, and then also usually involving some executive team trainings. So their department head team or whoever they have that are also in supervisory roles or leadership roles, and we'll do some intentional training around what their opportunities are. And so that it's usually a combination of the two because as a leader is also trying to evaluate where are my opportunities and where am I missing to really get the full engagement of a team. We'll be able to analyze based upon meetings and other engagements that they have as a group. We'll be able to go back and on a one-on-one look at, all right, this is something that I see as an opportunity. How can you change your approach or what could you do in addition to what you're currently doing that's going to improve that engagement with your team? So it usually ends up being a combination of the two, one-on-one and then executive team leadership trainings. And then I'll also do all team meetings, get the entire team together if they're able to, and then we'll dig into some and be very transparent and be very upfront about this is one of our challenges, and we need the entire team and the entire team's involvement and buy-in in order to be able to really move this forward. So it's kind of that three stage, one-on-one, executive level training, and then all team training.
Okay, and so it's not like you're a consultant where you come in, evaluate the situation, give them a plan, and say, see you later. This is an ongoing relationship that you're working with them over time and doing different things.
Yes, you painted that picture beautifully. I am not that person that just wants to drop information and go. I definitely want to be involved and help the team and be able to, as we implement certain focus or principles, to be able to look at and say, all right, we need to tweak this a little bit so that there's better involvement and better engagement as a team and be with them throughout the process to help them create what they're hoping to create.
It seems that most of these long-term care facilities or senior facilities, senior care facilities are in companies that have multiple facilities.
Hmm.
So do you go and talk and sell your idea and get hired by the parent group, or is it more that you're going to individual facilities that are asking for your help?
Well, I've had both, and it just depends on that wherever I get my initial interaction with, whether it's with that owner or that person that's operating maybe a city-owned or community-owned facility, or I've had engagement with a CEO of a multi-facility organization. So I've had both, and the multi-facility organizations. They'll have me kind of go out to different facilities depending on the need, right? Or depending on if they have a new leader, a new administrator who's really fresh and doesn't quite know the ins and outs of the organization, and I'll spend some one-on-one time with them because I'll tell you, I don't know how familiar you are with long-term care, but it can be a very stressful environment because the regulation is so high. It's
Yeah,
so intense. And
yeah.
so these new leaders that step into these opportunities, it's kind of like when you first have a baby. You can read every book to
Mhm.
try and know what are the best things to do to be that great parent, but you're really not going to know what it's like until you actually have a baby. Same thing sitting or stepping into a role like an administrator or a director of nursing at these skilled nursing facilities. It is intense and it's impossible to know until you step in and try and um, until you experience it. And so my goal is to help those new leaders to be able to handle all that comes at them because it's a lot.
So I'm a physical therapist, so my career was in healthcare, and I was the
That's
CEO
fantastic. Yeah.
of a company that is a rehab company, a physical therapy company in the Pacific Northwest. So I understand that. And people that work in those facilities, the caregivers are just a special breed, that
Mm,
can deal with the elderly and all the issues that are going on with that or whatever. But then there's also the piece, as you say, the administrative piece where you have to make the business run and it has to
yeah.
be profitable to continue. Yet, it can't be, as you said earlier, all about the numbers. It has to be about, what are we doing this for and who are we helping and who's the real main focus. So I imagine that your background in this area, working in these facilities and whatever, it gives you a lot of insight to help the leaders see that.
Yeah, it has been great for me to be able to have that background so that I understand the challenges that they're going through and recognizing, as you said, who are we serving? That can get lost sometimes because of that intense regulation, because of the many different depending on the organization, the many different measurements that they're trying to evaluate on an ongoing basis. It can get lost in who you're trying to serve. And I think it's interesting to see where a lot of leaders kind of forget to focus on their team. And rightfully they're focusing on the resident or the patient, to try and give them the great experience that they deserve. But in the process, they're kind of losing out on taking the time for their own team members. You mentioned the caregivers. They're absolutely phenomenal what they do. The intensity of that work is so high, but they do it because they love to serve. They love to care for individuals. And it's a tragedy when leadership in those roles kind of look over the caregivers and are just focused on the patient or the resident, and they forget that they need to be investing in the caregiver. They need to be investing in and helping them have the right kind of experience, which by doing that, it ends up benefiting the resident because they've created an environment where team members love to be there. They're engaged. They love the hard work, and then the beneficiary ultimately is the resident and their family members.
Well, there must be money to be made and profits to be made in that industry because we see these facilities just popping up everywhere where we didn't used to see quite
Yeah.
as many. And so there's definitely a money side of it. Or is it just that there's, with the baby boomers aging and the next Gen Xers coming on not too long, is it just because there's such a demand? What is it from your perspective? Is it a good business opportunity for people to go in and make some money?
Yeah, I think some people see it as that. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people underestimate just how challenging it is. I mean,
Yeah.
when it comes to the reimbursement, when a facility is operating exceptionally well and they have a good balance of there are long-term residents as well as there are those short-term skilled residents, as we refer to them as. If
Hmm.
you have that right balance, there's some good money to be made in those operations. But I think some people might be looking through that lens of this is a good opportunity and we're going to make lots of money. And then they step in and don't realize, boy, there's so much more that we need to know about operating and about regulation and about making this whole thing successful. And so there are some companies that come and go relatively quickly because it's so much harder than what they expected. But when it comes to assisted living facilities, that I think those are popping up
Yeah.
on a regular basis, and they can be successful, but they have to be putting the right emphasis on creating the environment and not just having a beautiful facility for residents to come into.
And there's different levels as well, right? Because some facilities would have independent living, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing facility, all in the building or the facility itself. And then there's others that handle just assisted living
Hmm.
or just independent living. And then when a resident's care is needs greater care, then they have to move from there into different facilities. So there's very different levels of those type of organizations.
Absolutely. And there are some organizations that they want to have that continuum of care so that they can have someone at the independent level. And then when they need it, they are able to transition to the assisted living level. And then ultimately, if something else happens and they need to go to that skilled level of care, they like to be able to have that entire continuum of care. But then there are also those other organizations that recognize, hey, we are really good at the skilled nursing level, so we're going to focus just on that. Or we're really good at assisted living, and so that's what we're going to do, and we're going to make sure that we do it exceptionally well. So there's both. Yeah.
What trends do you see in the industry? Are there more and more people going towards the full menu type of plan where from all the way from independent living all the way to, memory care and so on? Or are you seeing more of a trend where skilled nursing facilities by themselves are opening and doing well? And what's the trend in the industry, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I had some data in front of me, but I personally see that there is a decent amount of a decent trend where people are opening up to the idea of, an independent living or even an assisted living, whereas prior there might have been a lot more resistance or hesitation because they don't want to leave their home. That's where they want to die, and they don't want to
Right.
ever transition from there. And so I do feel like that through good communication and through marketing efforts, organizations have increased um, that volume of people that will come in at an independent level first, and then we'll be able to go through the continuum. But I wish, Steve, I had more of that data in front of me to be able to tell you, because there probably is data that would tell us kind of where the patterns are, or the trends. And it's probably also dependent on the area of the country too.
Right. Well, it's true. I think that everybody wants to stay in their home.
Mm.
And then you have to just look at, okay, what are my needs? And you can have caregivers come into the home, but that can be expensive. And then you have to
Mhm.
continually, people come and go, and so you have to continually, look for people versus where you go into a facility where all that's taken care of. From a cost perspective, is it more cost effective to go into a facility that handles that, or can you make it work by bringing caregivers into your home?
You absolutely can, and there are great caregiving companies that will be able to provide that kind of assistance that they need at home. It really depends on the level of need of that individual, because there are some that are just they're very independent, and they just maybe need a little bit of help when it comes to either food prep or maybe just baths or something of that nature, and they're still independent, and that's great. Feed that independence for as long as possible. And great home caregivers are able to assist in that process. There are many, however, that are probably not where they should be living independently, and they're pushing the envelope because they just really want to stay home. And so that can get a little bit dangerous. And in those situations, if they had to bring in a caregiver into the home and pay privately for, if they're paying like eight hours a day, um, 7 days a week, that can get really costly quickly. And then also, any of the expenses of the home and things like that. That in those situations, I would say it's probably more cost effective for them to be in an assisted living facility where they're having a lot of those services provided for them. So it really depends on what their level of care is.
And then we often forget about how tough it is, kind of the silent sufferer in all this is the family member, the spouse, or who's ever doing the caregiving, that they're elderly as well, and breaking them down. So, we have to
Yeah.
take that in consideration as well.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring that up. And what I like to bring up is when it comes to assisted living facilities and skilled nursing facilities, depending on what the level of care is that they need, there's a significant component to socialization that adds to one's fulfillment in life and overall health. And if someone is just locked up in their house all day and have no interactions other than maybe phone calls with people, or the child that comes in and visits, or whatever on a semi-regular basis, it's just not the same as when someone maybe goes and moves into an assisted living facility, and they are surrounded by others that are in a similar situation, but now they're able to engage in, coffee groups or have lunch together. And that socialization, just it totally ups the level of health of most individuals, and there are studies behind this. And
Yeah.
so I think it can be damaging when someone pushes too far to stay home, when there could actually be a lot more fulfillment and a lot more joy in their life, should they consider something like a long-term care facility where they're able to engage and be with people that are of similar situations.
Yeah. What part of the country do you work out of? Do you have a geographic area, or do you go anywhere?
Well, I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, but the clients that I serve are throughout the Midwest. So I have a number here in Lincoln, but then I also have several that are in Iowa and Kansas mostly.
Yeah. And where do you see that industry going? Is it going to be more of what you're doing right now? Is it going to be just helping them figure out how to do this better, or is there going to be something new and exciting? Does AI come into this?
Mm.
Do robots come into this? I mean, what's the sci-fi future of this industry?
That is a great question. I would say, just from what I've learned of AI up to this point, AI is going to affect most all industries. And I would say it's absolutely going to affect this one as well. And hopefully in a very positive way. It's something that I don't fear it in this industry. I think it will end up benefiting robots as well. I mean, there's potential for, even serving meals and things of that nature and having the robotics. There's already some little box robots that will bring trays around to people that, it's not very common, but it
Mhm.
exists, right? And
Yeah.
so I see the industry absolutely changing. It's changed significantly in the 20 years that I've been involved with it. And it will continue to change. But I think in so many regards, it's going to change for the better. It will be exciting to see what happens. What I'm excited and what I love is that those clients, I have a lot of clients that are in that long-term care world, but I actually have ended up getting clients that are not in the long-term care world just because they're seeing the opportunity of putting emphasis and focus on the leadership and their culture and these principles that we teach and that we go over are universal. They're not limited to the long-term care world. So
For
I'm really
sure.
grateful for those individuals I get to work with.
So give an example of that. Like, are you talking about someone who just is in a different business of long-term care that they say we want to build our leadership program, we want to build our culture. So basically you're becoming a culture leadership coach as well outside of the long-term care facilities.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been able to engage with several private practices, primary care physicians, dentists, and they just see that need. And many of these practitioners, they get into that world, that industry, wanting to be able to serve those people, whether it's in dentistry or in primary care. But they also they find out as they get into it that they didn't really get a whole lot of training in how to lead teams.
Yeah.
They just learned how to fix teeth or how to diagnose and how to provide exceptional care, but then they don't necessarily know how do I engage my team and help them get over the challenges that they have with each other, with a difficult patient. And so I've actually had a lot of fun and a lot of success being able to help those practices. I also serve a refuse company in Lincoln, which has been absolutely phenomenal. Just a wonderful group of individuals, and we've changed certain systems, but a big component of it is that they put more focus on just developing their drivers and their shop. They have a maintenance shop and everything like that. And it's amazing what happens to an organization regardless of the industry. But when you put intentional efforts in these areas of leadership and team culture, amazing things happen.
Well, a big part of leadership, as we know, is communication, and
Mm.
clarity is such an important piece of that. Ambiguity is just,
Mm.
people don't do well with that. So helping, it seems like a simple thing to say and do, but it isn't because a lot of people miss that. You cannot be too clear. You need to be as clear as possible to make sure that people know exactly what the mission is, exactly what you're trying to do, who your focused customer is, and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah, Patrick Lencioni wrote a great book called The Advantage where he talks about that clarity and that you don't you can't communicate it once and think that you've communicated it enough. You have to reinforce that clarity multiple times. You have to be that chief reminding officer, right? You're constantly communicating to make sure that the vision, the mission, core values are being not only understood but are being lived, and that correction is happening when it needs to happen. But that clarity is something that is often thought to be there, but is not. And like you said, that confusion or that ambiguity, it can be very damaging to a team when they think they have it, but they really don't.
That is a great book. That was one of the books I just really enjoyed as well, The Advantage. And Patrick Lencioni is a great leadership coach on that. And it's so true. And you have to say things over and over and over and over again. In advertising, they say you have to hear something 7 or 10 times before it clicks in. And
Yeah.
it's not a whole lot different in what we're talking about here. to the point where you might sound like a broken record, or a lot of leaders will sometimes say, well, I already told them that. They already know that, but they don't. So you just have to keep, reinforcing that message and make it as clear as possible and be patient over time and just keep going after it.
Yeah, you're so right. It's similar to if we were to simply tell our spouse, I love you, and I said it once, I don't need to say it again,
Yeah,
right? You've got to
yeah.
continue to reinforce it, and you provide clarity around it. Why do I love you? And be very specific. And leaders have that responsibility to do that with their teams to drive that clarity. You've got new team members that are coming on board and they may not have heard the message, but you also need to make sure that those that have heard the message truly understand the message and reinforce it. And do it with love and do it with that excitement and passion that it deserves. And then you'll see amazing things happen. But you have to make sure that you're reinforcing that clarity.
Unfortunately, we kind of live in a world where trust has been eroded a bit.
Mm.
And we know that trust just, it's such a key element in leadership teams and working together as a company and working together as executive teams that trust is so important. So how do you bring that in to a group or a company when everyone's kind of a little gun shy on the trust because we
Mhm.
live in a world that it's hard to trust things.
It is. That's a tough topic for many teams to really try and dig into because it requires some vulnerability. And if there's a lack of trust, it's felt. And we already mentioned Patrick Lencioni, but he does a book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, where
Yeah.
the foundational principle or dysfunction is that lack of trust. And
Yeah.
so we need to build that trust, and it needs to be a vulnerability-based trust, a trust where team members are willing to say, "I'm sorry. I really messed up there, and or I need your help. I recognize that you're so good at this, and I could really benefit if you would be willing to help me." That willingness to be vulnerable allows for your own barriers to come down and it invites the person that you're communicating with barriers to come down as well. And then there can be a bond that grows from that. But it really has to be based on vulnerability and a willingness to put yourself out there, so to speak. And until that trust really develops, it's very hard to build anything else on top of that. You have to trust those people around you. So there are certain exercises that you can do, but some of that I like to do is I like to challenge team members to do exercises where they're recognizing the strengths in each other, but then also being willing to be vulnerable about their own weaknesses, which then allows people to be more strategic about if this is your weakness, I can help you in this, and then we'll work together. So you said it absolutely beautifully that trust is so challenging to have as a team, but it's absolutely vital in order to be able to build something truly special.
All the books you read and most of the experts you talk to talk about this vulnerability and how important it is. Yet it's almost like, especially young leaders have to experience it or go through it to believe it. To me, a really good thing to do, and I think people respond to it sometimes, is when someone asks you a question or something comes up or whatever, and you, as the leader, says, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Mm.
What do you think? What should we do? Whereas, as often young leaders, I think we have to know the answer or we should know the answer. So even if we don't, we act like we do, which, it erodes the trust, like you said, especially when it's wrong. So it's one of those things that if we could ever teach young leaders right away is just be willing to say, I don't know the answer to that.
Amen, Steve. I mean that seriously is a huge challenge. And speaking from experience early on, I remember thinking that I had to portray this image that I know the answer, right? That you come to me, I'm going to be able to solve this, and I know the answer, and we're going to be able to figure this out. And unfortunately, through very hard mistakes, I had to learn that lesson. And through amazing people around me it actually became a great lesson that built relationships because being willing to say, I don't know the answer to that. And then you took it to the next step, which is beautiful. What do you think we should do?
Yeah.
That not only is expressing that I'm I'm a fallible leader. I don't have all the answers, and I shouldn't have all the answers, but I should have great people around me that can help us get to the right answer. What do you think that we should do? That then uh, opens the door for them to even be able to expand their capabilities, and to be able to use some of their expertise and be able to help come up with exceptional ideas that could move you forward or could resolve an issue or even build on an opportunity. So I think if we could drive that point home with new leaders, don't go into a new operation or a new team with the idea that you need to have the answers. Recognize that you don't, and involve team members around you, because they will actually, utilizing the group and engaging the group, you're going to find a much better answer or solution than what you come up with on your own.
Words matter, and we all have biases with certain words or certain phrases, and that I don't know is one of those negative things that a lot of people struggle with. A word that, or a different way to say it, maybe that I think is a really good way to promote that is just talk about, you don't have to say you don't know, but just say, I'm really curious. Use the word
Mhm.
curious because I'm
Mhm.
curious what others have done. I'm curious what you think. I'm curious what if we did this versus that. And so, in a way, you're kind of saying that I don't know, but it's presented more as I'm just really open and I'm very curious, which I think people handle better.
Absolutely. Yeah, that curiosity actually will take a leader in all kinds of new fields, and be able to expand in totally new ways, you know. That opens the door for that humility and that true interest in finding out about others and about situations. Be curious. That curiosity can be huge.
So you said earlier that you've experienced as a healthcare worker executive yourself, and then now as a coach, you see it as well. What are you mentioned before that there's certain companies that just do it so well and it's so obvious. What is it, generally speaking, that they do so much better than the companies that don't?
That's a great question. I honestly think it starts with the leader. And it's usually a leader that is very humble, and one that is kind of like what we were talking about. That leader that's curious, that leader that recognizes that it's all about the people that are around him or her, that are going to really make that difference, right? Whereas tho- those leaders, those specific leaders, really bring out the best around them. They get people to be not just wanting to complete their responsibilities and their duties, but rather they want to accomplish the mission, and they want to achieve the vision, whatever that is for that organization. They buy into something more than just themselves or their duties or responsibilities. And it's usually those leaders that are very much more just engaged, and they're humble, and they bring an excitement and a passion that's kind of infectious. I bring up humility a lot because I feel like that element is something that is missed in leadership significantly. Because again, like we talked about, those leaders that feel like they need to have the answer, they feel like they need to be the smartest person in the room. That can be very, very damaging to a team to really achieve what is the potential of that group. So yeah, I do think those teams that are doing it exceptionally well, it starts with the leadership. It starts with those individuals, that one individual or those individuals that are really engaging the rest of the team in that humble and that excited manner.
I think we could all agree that everyone says you need great, team members. You need to hire the right people. You need to make sure you have talent aboard. But I think that the piece of that people don't always think about as much is how to delegate. And then once you delegate, to give people the autonomy and you trust them, back to the word trust, you trust
Mm.
them to do a job, even if it's not exactly right or exactly the way you would do it, but you can learn from those experiences and what happens. And I think if you do that, then I talked to somebody just recently on this program as well, And she made the comment, she goes, you know, the best CEOs really aren't that busy.
Mm,
Because a lot of times we think that the best CEOs are these people that do a million different things and they must be working 18 hours a day and doing all this. And she said, no, the best ones are the ones that build the best teams, develop the leaders underneath them, delegate appropriately. And if you do that really well, you don't need to be that busy.
yeah. Yeah, so true. I absolutely love that. A phrase that I love to use is that good leaders lead, but great leaders multiply. And
Yeah.
so those good leaders, they'll have people that follow them, and they do a good job, and others are trying to help accomplish whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. But a great leader is investing in the people around them, and they're making them leaders. They're expanding that leadership, and as other people become better leaders, they're multiplying that benefit across an entire organization, however big that organization is. And so good leaders will lead, but great leaders will multiply. And you're absolutely right in that they should be empowering the people that are responsible for their, whatever their responsibility is, that belongs to them. And be involved, but you can't try and take it over. You can't be overly involved. I was reading an article actually yesterday where a leader was talking about the caddy style. And I loved this idea where you can be that caddy where you're providing some perspective about something. I think that this would be the right club for this kind of shot, but ultimately, who's the one that's got to swing the club? You give them that responsibility to swing the club. You're that person that will give perspective, but ultimately it's their responsibility. And so leaders at the top should absolutely not be the ones that are so stressed out and so busy. They should be empowering the right people. And if they empower the right people, amazing things happen, and it's not even them.
Well, we keep coming back to this, and you've said it many times throughout this discussion, but yes, it's especially young leaders, I think they need to know the strategy and how to grow and do all those things, and that's their number one focus. But I think you said it, and I believe it wholeheartedly in myself, is that the number one goal of a leader should be to help other leaders learn and grow.
Mm,
You focus that, if you do that, then those other things will just naturally happen because you're bringing it together. So I think, especially as young leaders, you come into a position or a company and you think, oh my God, I've got to figure out how we're going to grow and double our profits. And I got to figure out how to do this. And I got to figure out how to do that. Where really, if you came in and just said, I've got to help all our people in this organization learn and grow, it's a different mindset and a different focus. And I would argue that is probably better in the long run.
I couldn't agree more. The best measurement, in my opinion, for how well a leader is doing is how well they are developing the people around them. Are they creating other leaders, and are those leaders expanding their influence to the people that they serve? That's the true measure of a leader. Not if other people are leading, but are you creating other leaders and helping to mentor and develop them and help them to really accomplish and become more of the potential that they have inside of them? That's the true measure of a leader. And those are the people that change organizations and change the world.
Spencer, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything that we haven't covered or I haven't brought up that you want to be sure and get in the program today?
No, I mean the reality is I feel like I have a lot of belief in people, and there is so much capacity and capability in everyone, but we can't accomplish it alone. And so I feel like that's the responsibility of leaders to be able to be those individuals that are helping to other individuals to grow, the people around them to grow. If we think about our own development and the opportunities that we've had, I think we could all recognize individual mentors that were just phenomenal. They were uh, key people in our own development. And then we probably could also identify that there were some leaders that were just rough. Maybe they weren't leaders. They were people in supervisory roles, but they weren't leaders. and they gave us a bad experience, and which is helpful in its own right. But ultimately, if someone's going to take that responsibility to be a leader, I want to help them understand the importance of that responsibility so that they can go and do something truly special with it, which is to develop people around them and help them make their work and their lives as a whole better.
So what does 2026 look like for you, Spencer, going forward in your business? What do you hope, what's your vision? What do you hope that's going to happen and what are you working towards?
That's a great question. I love the clients that I currently have. The goal is to continue to expand that platform of the number of clients that I serve. I ultimately want to bring on, because it's right now just myself in the pathway consulting, but I ultimately want to bring on other consultants that are also going to be able to help expand the message and bring it to more and more people. So 2026, I'm hoping will bring some expansion. It'll bring another consultant on board.
You okay? So, Spencer, at this time in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question. And that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
Mm. Boy, I don't know if I have too many pearls of wisdom, but what I would say is humility is probably one of the uh, qualities that are least prevalent in the leadership world. And if we all could take the time to recognize those wonderful people around us that make amazing things happen, if we can express that appreciation, whether it's current people that we currently work with or people that we have worked with, and express that appreciation for the impact that they've had. If we live a life more of gratitude, then that humility is a quality that can be with us and can also end up benefiting environments and teams in a much stronger way. So to really put some emphasis on expressing that gratitude, embracing humility, because humility is something that can really drive teams in a way that I think is lost on most organizations.
Well said. Well, Spencer, this has been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed talking with you today. Sounds like you're doing fun and exciting things and helping leaders grow and learn. And as we said earlier, almost more importantly, helping them take care of the people that they should be focused on, which is those that they're giving care to and providing service for. So thanks so much for your time today. I've learned a lot. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. I really this was a lot of fun for me, and I really appreciate what you do. You're spreading the good word, and it's an amazing platform. I love that you do it.
Okay, thanks so much. Well, take care. Enjoy the holidays, and maybe we'll see each other down the road one of these days.
I hope so. Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.